truth. Because Jesus Christ the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. He does not change. So you will either see your circumstances in light of that reality, or you will view God's character in light of your changing circumstances. So one will judge the other. And if you view God's character in light of your circumstances, guess what happens? You're on a roller coaster. When things are going well, He's a great God, you can trust Him. Things are not going well, I'm not so sure I can trust Him anymore. Because what you are doing then is you are now viewing God's character through the prism of your circumstances. Well, that's a very dangerous way of looking at it. So the wise person then says, look, there's this anchor. There's this one thing. What's the thing that is immutable? It's the thing that never changes. In this life there seem to be no certainties, but there is a certainty, and it's the unchanging character of the living God. And if we cling to that character and hold on to Him, we'll realize those circumstances don't change Him. But instead we're to view them in light of what He is about and allows in our lives for our greater good and for our development. God knows that this person needs certain things that another person does not need. Each of us is unique, and what's prescriptive or needful for one is not necessarily for the other. So there is an important uniqueness in the way that God deals with us and treats us. Why does He heal one person and then another is not healed? I don't have a clear answer for that. But God Himself knows, and my conviction is when we see Him face to face, we will be satisfied. And there will be no objection to Him. There'll be no one who says, but I thought you... No one will say that, because we'll recognize He does all things well. And we'll see this earthly sojourn with all its trials and adversities as the merest moment in comparison to what will now endure forever. That's why I often think about the fact that we should imagine meeting 300 years from now and setting up an appointment 300 years from now. It's not a bad way of looking at it, because I can pretty well assure you, you're not going to be in this earth suit. And looking back, do this thought experiment of imagining 300 years from now you've been in His presence and in the presence of the communion of saints, the resurrected body of believers, and that you look back on this past. It's sort of like the way I look back on, let's say, my 5th birthday. My first several decades just seem, like a moment. They seem transitory. The older we get, the quicker the years seem to go by, and we can look at our life almost as if it was just like a little moment. You'll see your whole life from that standpoint as just that. And so we'll recognize that all those things we went through were as nothing in comparison to what they produced. And that's really where the redemptive dimension lies. That nothing happens by accident. In spite of the fact that we are living in a fallen world, still God is sovereign enough to use even wicked intentions and to accomplish a greater good out of those. And that's, I think, a perspective we make. So it's your point of view. It's your perspective that makes all the difference. Any other... yes, Lewis.
What I was thinking about, your comment on Hotel Rwanda, I see people who, there is an outward suffering, but then they, not to pick up on him, they take it into their heart and they wear that suffering to where it's a self-inflicted. And you're talking about, we can't avoid aging, but you can accelerate it. I see people that just take every little wound they get. And when you were reading that list of everything that happened to Paul, he's like, well, that's old news. I'm moving forward. He's throwing that aside.
Yeah, that's why he would say, forgetting what lies behind, I press on for what lies ahead. And I think if you allow the afflictions and disappointments to define you, you will be embittered and you will age faster. It will age you, and it will make you weak and weary, bitter. Yeah. It can be destructive. There's no question there's this psychosomatic dimension where our spirit and our soul and our bodies are interconnected in that regard. So I think that, again, the quality of a person who clings to Christ and loves Him and hopes in Him and does not become embittered is a person who, all things being equal, will have a greater joy. And this is the thing about it. There are some people who look like they've been weaned on a dill pickle. People who claim to be followers of Jesus. Have you ever seen people like that? You know, yeah, they speak to somebody who's a new believer, they're all exuberant. Yeah, I was like that too, but you know, eventually you'll be just like me. Boy, that's a scary thought. You know, what happened to their joy? And so this is the issue. Joy is a fierce thing, a fierce joy. This joy that transcends circumstances. You see, happiness is based in circumstances, but not joy. Joy can go beyond that. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. It's part of the fruit of the Spirit of God. And so joy transcends circumstances. Joy is a choice, just as love is a choice. Yes?
And I think sometimes a lot of people, you say, how are you doing? They say, what are the circumstances?
Yeah, what are you doing under the circumstances?
What are you doing under the circumstances?
Yeah.
You get on top of it.
I've heard that. Yeah. But the fact is, it's a joy becomes really, as I say, it's a choice. To love is a choice, joy is a choice, peace is a choice. And the choice is whether I'm going to walk by the power of the Spirit and allow the fruit of the Spirit to rule and control, or whether I'm going to become embittered and look just at the earthly perspective. You see, the biblical perspective on the goodness of God, there's an eschatological dimension, which just means looking to the end times. The biblical perspective is that we will be satisfied, and that we will look and see that all things have been done well. I think that's an orientation that we hold on to. Yes?
Is that not what Paul was talking about when he said, thank you for the thorn in this flesh?
Yes, and because here, remember, Paul says, 3 times I prayed that he would remove it. But then he says, no, I'm not going to do that, because my grace is made power through your weakness. So when I'm weak, then I will rejoice, because then I am strong in Christ. And part of it then is if everything goes our way, you know what will happen. You'll become arrogant, cocksure. You'll be a person who then becomes autonomous and independent. So often God uses the severe mercies that are necessary for us to really maintain a sense of humility. I think our basic default mechanism is to going back to the arrogance of autonomy, where we suppose that we're in control and things go well. You know what would happen to you if everything went your way? Imagine a whole year, everything you want, you get. Everything goes your way. You'd be ruined. Your character would degenerate, and you'd become cocky, and you would become intolerable. So that God, I think, uses these things and keeps us humble and causes us to realize that control is but a bubble. It's an illusion. You never have control. And so He wants us to see that. And so sometimes He'll show this to us individually. Sometimes, as in what we're going through economically, He'll show this to us as a group of people. But that's a bubble. Yeah. John?
In past centuries, has the prosperity doctrine or the holding God to a promise He didn't make, presumption versus faith kind of thing, has it ever been as strong as it is in our culture, in our generation, where we have to have pain reduction mechanisms? Has it ever been this strong as it is in, say, this country, in this culture today?
It'd be an interesting study, wouldn't it, to do a history of the prosperity gospel. I don't think you're going to see it in much evidence prior to the 20th century. Because there, for the first time, really, you had a whole country, a whole civilization, where people could now have such affluence and such comfort relative to what the human race has ever known before. Remember, you and I live more comfortably than kings did 200 years ago. You have to remember that. No king lived with the comforts you enjoy, with the luxuries, with the options you enjoy. We could unpack that if you want, but you live with great pleasure in comparison to that. And so I think we're in a generation of people who can make the blunder of mistaking earth for heaven. And you don't see the prosperity gospel playing out well in third world countries. It doesn't play out well. And so, I think it's just... it's a horrific teaching in many ways. But I don't think that you see much of that in evidence. And so, yeah. Well, let me just tie together some thoughts here and complete this one section. I promised that I told Vic I was going to use this little verse, and I intended to do so. The last person I want to look at is Joseph. And Joseph's an interesting illustration of a person who went through both extremes. He went through one extreme, which was